Hello and welcome to Venture Café Presents. I'm Christine Dunn. Joining me today is Flanigan. She's the Director of Campus Sustainability and Social Innovation for EcoMotion. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about what sustainability means to you.
Sure. Fortunately, there's growing consensus around what sustainability means as this intersection of social, economic, and environmental justice. The Brundtland Commission and the United Nations coined the term sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the needs of future generations to do the same. For me, sustainability represents resolving disconnect, whether that's social, economic, or environmental, through creative and practical solutions.
So what does that mean exactly? When you go and you work with a university, what might be the scope of a project that you might work on? What are some of the most common issues that a campus might call you in for?
Sure. Well, we really see campuses as microcosms of society and living labs. So when we're talking about comprehensive sustainability, it really starts with building institutional capacity for sustainability leadership. So rather than creating something brand new, oftentimes that process begins with listening and understanding the systems and the channels and pathways that already exist, and how can we weave sustainability practice and culture into those. So we'll oftentimes start with an assessment of what's strong and where is there need for improvement, and then enlist key stakeholders to usually create some kind of central nervous system for sustainability decision making at committee. And then the next logical step would be to write a plan to set key targets and goals around sustainability metrics that are relevant to that campus. So if you're in California, that might mean focusing first on water, or if you're a school that's committed to carbon neutrality, you want to inventory your carbon emissions and start to figure out a roadmap for reducing those emissions. So it really depends on the campus.
Are there kind of top three issues that you're kind of finding kind of bubble to the top in terms of what campuses are looking for, or at least what they start with when they start thinking about sustainability?
Well, of course, many schools are grappling and struggling with recycling, which to me is a more boring topic, but it is something that a lot of us can relate to. Another area is food and food systems. There's more and more pressure to buy local, to buy organic. So that's something that many schools are also touching on. And then climate change could not be more relevant to future generations. Almost 700 colleges and universities have actually committed to carbon neutrality, and through a binding commitment that the presidents and chancellors have signed. So that's another kind of impetus for schools to act. And then the last kind of reason that schools are acting is the admissions piece. The Princeton Review found that 68% of prospective college students are looking at a school's green profile. So there's a myriad of reasons that schools are investing in sustainability, not to mention it being good for their bottom line.
Let's go to the issue of climate change that you were talking about. So what would be an example of a series of projects or a program that you might put together for a campus in order to help them meet that goal for climate change?
Sure. So one great example is one of our partner schools, Millbrook School, right outside of Poughkeepsie, New York. And they have set an ambitious goal of carbon neutrality by 2020. So after reviewing their carbon footprint and kind of where all the emissions were coming from, scope 1, 2, and 3, we wrote a sustainability and climate action plan and started to explore renewables. And through working with the utility provider and the state, just a couple of weeks ago, actually, we interconnected a 1.73 megawatt solar system that will now offset 100% of the school's electricity load. So renewables is one way of going about that. Of course, energy efficiency and investing in deferred maintenance projects. One creative solution that we're always advocating for is the development of a green revolving loan fund, which now over 90 schools have adopted. And essentially it's like recycled money. So a designated fund for energy efficiency, deferred maintenance, any sustainability project that has a return on investment. And those savings will then be tracked, measured, and used to replenish the initial source of seed funding. So that's one way of kind of closing the loop and making sustainability relevant to existing systems and meeting goals, etc.
So when you work with a school, do you help them do the assessment and then devise the plan, or then do you also help with the execution as well? So do you help with identifying partners or identifying programs? How soup to nuts are you in the way that you approach the consulting that you do?
Right. So the whole business model is to be as dynamic as possible. While many schools have established sustainability coordinator positions, others have centers for sustainability. But then the majority of schools have either lack the political willpower or the resources to invest that way. So our services are designed to kind of meet schools where they are. Every school is at a very different place on their journey towards sustainability. And frankly, sustainability means something different on every campus. So like I said before, it really starts with coming and learning and listening to a school to understand what their objectives are, what's been done thus far, and where the potential lies. So whether that's conducting an audit or helping them really build that institutional infrastructure for thinking about sustainability, or if it's just adding bandwidth and expertise if they want to explore solar or renewables. We can provide services depending on what's needed, and our goal is obviously to empower a school so they don't need us and to really institutionalize sustainability so it's woven into the fabric of the institution. So to answer your question, we can either provide kind of light guidance and advising services, or we can be that sustainability coordinator kind of in the thick of managing projects and coordinating action.
When you think about what your goal is and why you're working with these schools, how would you define kind of your goal as you're kind of looking at the landscape of what's going on campuses?
Well, the reason that I'm doing this work is because I myself was a student that went from being a dormant change agent to an empowered entrepreneur or intrapreneur. It was through my experience as a student planting an apple orchard of all things on my college campus and really making that low-cost, high-impact initiative relevant to the community that really woke up the school's potential. So my goal is to help empower institutions to really be leading this sustainability movement, because I think they have this unique capacity to do so, as well as a moral imperative. So I'd like to see many more campuses out front on these issues, collaborating with one another, and this all goes against kind of how they were built and designed in kind of a siloed way.
When you take a look at campuses, are there some common aspects in terms of common challenges that you kind of see consistently happening on campuses in terms of either the way they're organizationally structured or physically structured that impedes them in the short term for sustainability, and you want them to kind of think about how to rethink that? Are there some common elements?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the first just being the fact that these schools are very decentralized and oftentimes fragmented and siloed in their own divisions. So what happens a lot without a really strong concerted sustainability program is that the wheel is not only reinvented over and over again, but it might be reinvented by two people who are working and building side by side who don't know each other. So I would say the communication is one of the most challenging aspects of this all. That's the number one. And then, of course, resources to invest in sustainability is another challenge. And just making it relevant to the whole community. It's still a really big paradigm shift that we're talking about. I mean, campuses and your degrees are very specialized, and sustainability has been called the ultimate liberal art because it's really this overarching framework and understanding that all of these social, economic, and environmental systems are very much inextricably linked.
Well, and it seems like there needs to come a point where instead of it becoming kind of this separate, independent, siloed initiative, somehow you got to integrate it into the fabric of everything that's going on.
Right, and that's a challenge. Fortunately, we're at a time in the field of campus sustainability that there's growing consensus around sustainability being broad. One thing that we've developed in the past 10 years is a tool called STARS, a sustainability tracking assessment and rating system that measures and benchmarks campus sustainability performance. And it includes the social, economic, and environmental domains of sustainability. So we're talking about everything from childcare and access issues to giving preference to historically underutilized businesses in the community, to as well as kind of what's your carbon footprint.
So do you publish those benchmarks on a regular basis? Like, is there like a ranking of schools that?
There's quite a few rankings. What we've tried to do with STARS is let that be the industry standard, so that we're measuring apples to apples. And over 300 schools have submitted STARS reports, and they're all online, live, transparent documents. The idea is that we can learn from one another.
And how often do you compile that report? Is it like an annual report, or is it kind of a rolling report, or how do you do it? Like, how do you create kind of that benchmark? Is it like on an annual basis you announce it, or how do you structure that?
Well, schools go about it all differently. But the STARS report in particular, you get a rating, essentially. It's similar to LEED for buildings, but it's much more comprehensive. And your rating is good for 3 years. So whether that's a bronze, silver, gold, or platinum rating, and then ideally you can use that as sort of a repository for everything that's going on, and you can see how your peers are doing as well in that process. And it's also great because it highlights other initiatives and ideas that maybe you didn't think you hadn't thought of.
Right.
And some schools use curriculum and courses to actually complete the report. Others have outside consultants that are working on submitting the report. Or a sustainability staff or personnel can work on the report. So every school uses it a little differently, but it's really nice to have that kind of shared knowledge about where the field's at and how schools are progressing.
That's great. Sierra, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
For the Venture Café Presents, I'm Christine Dunn.